Welcome to part two of getting the 65 back up and running. In part one, we did the fuel lines, the fuel filter. We put the power steering pump back in the car. So on this episode, we're going to take out the lines, clear them out. I'll show you a good way to do that, and then we're going to put the power steering gear out of the 7-liter in this car, because I changed the power steering gear in the 7-liter. It had a lot of slop in the steering whenever you moved it. A lot of the big portion of that was the pitman arm, and the idler arm on it was in horrible shape. But I felt like the gear, again, that car is really nice, so I felt like the gear should be changed as well. So I put a new power steering gear in there. The old one was still in pretty good shape. This one does have a brand new gear from Cardone in it. However, something's gone on with this, like I explained in the last episode, and I do not want to blow up this new pump and keep fighting that power steering. So I'm going to take that out. I'm going to clean the lines, put that used gear in here that's still in good shape, and we'll get the car back running. I need this car to run because here in the next day or so, I need to go pick up the owner's daily driver, and I got some cars that I need to shuffle around, so it's important I get this thing back running again. Let me get you in here and show you the kind of final, because I did a little bit of work off camera. I was thinking about making the episode with the fuel line, making that fuel line. I mean, I was making a -6 fuel line. It's not that interesting. You can see what I did. It's pretty straightforward as far as what the fuel line. I've got the filter, and then you just make the lines. Underneath there is just braided steel. -6 rubber line. So one of the things we were talking about was putting the Adele clamp. I was going to put it up here, but down here actually worked better for making that angle and making everything work right around that spot that we notched, and the hose coming up and everything working right. So now if you take this fuel line and you just kind of jiggle it, it doesn't move at all. That's a nice little spot down there. I left the fitting open so that I could get in and tweak on the fitting if I need. You shouldn't have to touch the back side of this at all, but I can definitely get to the screw to take this fuel filter out. This fuel filter is nice. It's not a micron filter or anything like that. It's just they're just a puck in there with a metal shield. So there's not much to that one. Like if big parts came out of the fuel pump for some reason, it would catch it. Any kind of micron stuff, it's not going to catch it. But it still looks cool nonetheless. So sometimes you've got to do stuff because it just looks cool. But so we got the pump in, bolted down. We got the belt on it. And in case you guys are unfamiliar with some of this Ford stuff, there's a little nub sticking off the end of the power steering pump right there. That's so that you can put a wrench on it to tighten up your pump. Don't put a pry bar back here and bend your housing. That's what that's for. If you don't have the right wrench, get the Fitzall wrench. That's the one I always use for that because it just makes it easy. But that's how you tighten that. Now, with this kind of style, you can over tighten this belt. You don't want to over tighten it too much because you don't want to put a lot of pressure on the crank. And then if you've got other stuff in there that runs over the water pump or something, you'd really put a lot of pressure on that water pump. So just put it, just like all the rest of them, just to where they're snug. So the pump is in, bolted down, tightened up. All the bolts are tight. Everything's good. Technically, right now I could start the car. You wouldn't want to because there's no fluid in here, and you don't want to run this dry. In fact, what I might do is actually, after I get done with all this, take the belt back off and then just kind of run this by hand. I always kind of do that when I change pumps. That way I can kind of work some of that air out of the system, get some of that fluid flowing through the lines. That way when you fire the car up, this thing doesn't instantly run dry. That's kind of what kills them, running dry. So I'll probably end up doing something like that. But for now, what we have is the return line, the pressure line right there. And we're going to do something with the pressure line because on this one, as you can see, it connects into the back of the pump right there. And you can see how close that actually gets to the exhaust manifold. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put some heat sleeve on this section of the line to keep the heat from coming out of the manifold and getting into this line. Why they made that like that, I'm not 100% sure. I have put a little bit more of a tweak in this line, but you got to be careful because you can actually collapse the line right there. And there's really not enough room for me to get a tubing bender in here to properly bend that. So you really got to be careful with that. If you just take and tweak it, odds are you're just going to kink the line and then the line's no good after that. So careful of that. And then I can put some heat sleeve on there, kind of like what I did with the fuel line over here, and that'll help that out a lot. The other thing that I'm going to do, and I was told by my Ford guy, is that there's actually supposed to be a power steering cooler on this car that's not here. When I got the car, it didn't have anything. It actually looked exactly like this. It just had the pressure line coming out of the pump. It had the return line going into the return spot, and that was it. There's two things I'm going to do to this car to give it a little bit of an upgrade. One is a suggestion by Cardone, and they suggest actually putting a power steering filter in. So you'll notice the power steering return line is short. I can still plug it into the bottom of the pump, and I'll probably do that today. But in the future, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run that pump, the return line, kind of up in here. And then right up in here on the side of the fender, I'm going to put a power steering filter in. So it's just a filter that comes off the return, and then that return line will actually come forward. And up here in the front of the grill, I'll show you on the 7-liter, there's a small power steering cooler that actually sits in there. Now this car doesn't have the provisions for it. I don't know if you can see down there, there's no holes, there's nothing like that. Let me take you over to the 7-liter and we'll take a look, and I'll show you what I'm actually going to put on my car. So back on the 7-liter over here, you can see this is the part, this kind of triangle piece is what we were just looking at. And if you look back right here, there's just a square hole, rectangle hole, cut in there. And then a small power steering cooler line. So it's just one little hoop with some fins. Real simple, real easy. It's got a nice little bracket, and then the hoses come out here at the bottom. And then you can see right here as it comes through, it's just right in line with this, with the inner fender well. And it all goes nice and good right there. So with my car, what I'm going to do is just duplicate that hole. And luckily for me, I have a bunch of Galaxies around, so I know exactly where to put that hole. I know exactly how big that hole has to be. And on top of that, my good friend has one of these coolers for a 7-liter. So he's going to give me that cooler later on in the week, into this week, maybe the beginning of next week, I'm not sure. He actually has a 63 Fairlane, or 65? No, 63 Fairlane. That's in paint right now. And so he asked me, hey, can you take that car in, put it in your shop, and do the gauges on it? A lot of people don't like doing electrical. I spent a lot of my career doing electrical. At Ford, I did a lot of electrical work there. So electrical to me is kind of fun. I know it drives some people crazy because it can get confusing, but I guess when you've done it for a long time, it's not so bad. But so he wants to put the Dakota Digital gauges in it, which honestly, they're not that hard. But I'll make a custom harness for it and that kind of stuff. Later, we're going to go fuel injection. He wants to do a 427 small block board stroked. naturally aspirated. And we're going to do fuel injection on that, some kind of multi-port. And so I'm gonna make the harness in such a way that later I can add to it, make it bigger. So I'm going to do a lot of electrical on that car, put the gauges in it. And when I do that, of course, I'll have the car on the channel. It is a beautiful low mileage. I think it's like 6,000 or 7,000 miles on that car. Beautiful, beautiful car. It's in paint right now. So when it comes here, it'll be totally stripped down. No interior, no nothing. Because it's coming straight from the paint shop, straight over to here. And one of the main reasons for that is I can put it indoors for, 4 or 5 days, however long it takes me to do the gauges. And then it's better for the paint. The paint will be able to cure longer in a clean environment. So we'll do that. The car will live here for a little bit, and I'll make some content off of it. But for now, let's get going on this. I'll get back to you once I've got that gear out and all of the power steering lines out, and I'll show you how I flush power steering lines. All right, we're back, and we have the power steering lines out of the car now. This is the pressure line, return line sitting down there. I've already drained them. They don't have any ATF in them, possibly just little remnants. You never want to wash oils or anything down the drain, so be sure not to do that. Drain your lines, guys. We do have to think about the environment. So what I've done is I've just taken the line and put a little bit of duct tape here on the bottom. It doesn't need to be, perfect on there or anything else. Basically what we're trying to do is we're trying to trap a fluid in here. And the fluid that we're going to use is basically just a cup of high concentrate dish soap. I use Palmolive. I grew up on Palmolive. It works great for everything. I have a bottle of it right here in the sink that I use for washing my hands when I'm not using the Fast Orange. Basically what I'm going to do is, and why I'm doing this is, I know there's probably guys out there that are freaking out right now because I'm putting water into a power steering line, but I'm going to show you how to clean it and also how to get that water back out. So high concentrate of Palmolive mixed in water. Don't ever just run Palmolive down the line, not unless you want your power steering to always foam up. Basically what you're doing, you just pour it in there, just, right down the throat. Try and do as much as you can. Maybe if you got a funnel and you want to use a funnel, doesn't really work too well on this line. On the other line, it's going to work a little bit better, because it's just a hose. And so basically all you're trying to do is fill it up. And the Palmolive mixture, use hot water. Hot water helps to break down oil and grime and all of that kind of stuff, as does the soap. And so by filling this thing up with soapy water, it's going to go in and loosen up any oils, dirts, debris, that kind of stuff that's actually in the line. It is leaking out of the other side, and that's fine because we're not trying to trap it in there. We want to flush it through, but you want it to slow down a bit so the soap has something to grab onto. Yeah, if you were to just dump straight soap down the line, you'll never be able to get that soap concentrate out. This way, if it's just a foamy water, it's not going to stay in there. It's not going to attach to the walls of the hose or anything else. And then we're just going to simply turn on the hot water. You want to be mindful of the other end. Don't stick it into anything. So I just stick it in the bottom of the funnel, so it's not hitting any kind of dirt or anything that's in the sink. And just flush that line out. Let that water pressure go right through it. One of the cool things that I have, and I'm probably going to make a gigantic mess using it, and you can get one of these for your sink at home. Maybe don't use this on the kitchen sink, unless you like getting yelled at. But it's just a simple hose bib with a I think this is like a PEX line fitting and some plastic line. I use this all the time. I use it for filling the mop bucket or cleaning out the sink or you know, doing anything, but this is gonna give me a hose to direct that fluid. So I'm gonna stick this on here, probably make a gigantic mess spraying water all over myself, but it's gonna force a lot more of that water at high volume through that hose. And so I'm just gonna crank it up. I'm gonna let it go until you feel like it's too much, and then give it another couple seconds. Not trying to waste water, but at the same time we need to make sure we get all of that soap and all the debris and everything else out of there. So that should be good. Now we've got a nice clear, clean power steering hose. Shouldn't have any dirt or debris. Obviously we can't go in there and check it, but I'd say for the most part that's about as clean as we're gonna get this. So now I'm gonna do the same thing to the return hose, which is going to be a little bit easier because on the bottom of the return hose, it's just a hose with a hose clamp, so I can hook it up to the funnel. Get a lot more of that soapy water to run through it. Next, what I'm going to do is just take the air line. Again, I have clean, dry air. I have a really nice compressor and a dryer and everything that's hooked up to it that produces nice, clean, dry air. And I'm just gonna spray this out. I'm gonna spray clean, dry air through it, blow as much of that water that I just put into it out. And then I'm gonna set this out into the sun. The sun is gonna evaporate off a lot of the water. And then after about, I don't know, probably about the time that I get the gear out of the car, which I'm just about ready to get the gear out. I got the wheel off. I just gotta pull those 3 bolts and then fish the gear out, fish the new gear in. By the time I'm done doing all that, this will probably sit outside long enough for it to dry off in the sun. And then what I'm going to do is take some rubbing alcohol and then dump rubbing alcohol through it. And that's going to go ahead and grab any water, any moisture, anything that's left over in the line, and it's going to pull it right out of that line. And then I'll just blow a little air through that. Rubbing alcohol will dissipate and evaporate very fast, so you don't have to worry about any residue from that. Then these lines will be clean, ready to go back into the car. So let me get this other line cleaned up. I'll get that gear changed, and then we'll get these back in the car. All right, so I got the car jacked up. And one of the things I wanted to do before I took the front wheels off is check the wheels for wobble. Because like I said, when I introduced this car, when I drive it, it feels like the whole car is just kind of wobbling around like you got a bent rim. Well, I know none of the rims are bent because I just bought them. They're all brand new. And I've had them on the balancer, and none of them are bent. So I know it's the car, and being that this is the left front, the side that's in an accident, I thought I would just simply spin the wheel in the air. So let's give that wheel a spin. And I don't know if you can see that, but it's got just a little bit of a wiggle to it. It's not horrible, but if you've got something like that at 55, 60, 70 miles an hour, it's going to make the car feel wiggly. Now, I've checked the right front and it doesn't do it. It's nice and smooth. I've rebuilt all of the brakes down here. The only part that I didn't rebuild was the hub and the spindle. So I'm hoping the spindle's not bent because, oh, that would be bad. But I'm pretty sure the hub's bent. And that makes sense because the side of this car was in a slight accident. This bumper actually used to be pressed in all the way to the fender here, and actually pulled it out pretty good. I stuck a flatbed or semi-truck strap right here, connected the other side to a forklift, and then just pulled on it. And that's actually pretty straight. This bumper's not in too bad a shape. I mean, it's a little wavy and stuff. This ding right here is the worst part of the whole thing now, but this whole thing used to be just bent right in. You see where it was touching on the fender right there. But so now I know this left front definitely has a problem, but that's okay because I bought the disc drum, leads, brake booster, and master for it, which that's what's going to go into it next. Now I know I need to order the brake kit for the front. I built this, again, just trying to get it ready for the duct tape drags, and so I was just trying to do everything as quick as possible, trying to get the car done, because really the drivetrain was the main part that I needed to finish. The rest of this stuff you can kind of just, you know, gloss over and do the best you can, and you can limp it down the highway kind of thing. And it wasn't horrible. That was not what was keeping me from driving the car, definitely. The lack of brakes was, and the spitting oil everywhere was. But the brakes were pretty bad on it, but that's due to the master and the booster. But now I know this is bent. I'm going to do the same thing in the rear eventually. Not this time, but I thought I'd just get you guys in here and show you kind of what I found. You know, if you're feeling something on your car, you don't need a big shop and everything else. A simple jack and some jack stands. Now normally, you know, I like to use the hoist, but the 7-liter is kind of taking that up right now. One of the things to point out real quick, since we're here and we're talking about it, is jack position. On this car, and like most rear-wheel drive cars and most cars out there, you have that center cross member. And you can see right in front of the cross member, one of the reasons I don't really care for the Fords too much is they've got a front sump oil pan. So, you know, if you hit something on the highway or you get too close to a stopping block or a curb or something, you're going to bend the crap out of that pan. Now you'll notice that pan is actually brand new, because I had to replace that, because I figured out what had happened is someone had put a jack on it right where I have the jack, except for they put it in the middle of that cross member. And you can see it's got oil on it, you know, probably got some road debris, that kind of stuff. That's a metal surface with a metal clawed jack. If you're not park or your park ring slips or anything else like that, that jack is going to slip. And that's exactly what happened. In fact, I have the old oil pan still. I'm not going to bore you with showing you. But what happened was someone was jacking it up. It slipped. And of course, the jack went flying forward and it smashed the oil pan. So something to think about, and what I always try and do, is you'll notice your floor jacks, they have little teeth that stick up. Take one of those teeth and lip it on the other side of that cross member, and that jack will never spit out on you. You know, you can see as you jack the car up, the car is going up in the front, which increases that angle. And so you'll never have a nice flat pad where that jack is going to grab. It's always going to be on one edge of that pad. But if you lip the tooth on the back side, it can never spit it out. And so that'll keep you safe. And of course, always use jack stands. I like using these. They're just from Harbor Freight. They do have the little pin that goes in them so that the teeth can't jump. I do like those. They're 3-ton. They're made by Dayton. You know, they're not super high end. Actually, you'll notice a lot of stuff in this shop is Harbor Freight and that kind of stuff, because honestly, there's nothing wrong with the tools. You see this jack is Harbor Freight. Nothing wrong with it, and it's quite a bit cheaper than some of the others. Is it the best one out there? No, but it does the job, and it does it really nice. So let's get back. I'm going to finish taking this gear out. I've already got the lines off. I undid the steering coupler. So now I just need to take the pitman arm off. I'm going to take that left front wheel off so that I can access the bolts that go through the frame. If I remember correctly, I think it's three bolts. It might be 4. I have to look again. But there's just a couple bolts in there. And then I think the hardest part of this whole thing is going to be trying to get the gear out from around that exhaust, because that exhaust comes right by it. Let me see if you can see. Okay, so from your view, the power steering gear should be right about there. And you can see the exhaust is here. And then there's all the steering underneath of that. So before I had the exhaust, It came out real easy, of course. And I do not want to drop that exhaust. It is a pain. I've already fought it once. I had the donuts go out on me, and so I had to replace the donuts. It is not fun. I don't want to do that again. When I had the exhaust made for this car, down there by the mufflers, I had them put V-band clamps. I call them turbo clamps because you see them on turbos, but they're V-band clamps. And so basically I can take the whole center section of this exhaust off, drop it off of the manifolds, undo it off the mufflers, and that whole center section comes out. Whenever you're doing exhaust, take the time, spend the extra whatever money it is to have your exhaust guy go ahead and drop some clamps in there like that. It'll save you headaches in the future. And on these cars always get worked on. You're always tinkering on something. And so if you ever had to get that transmission out, that would make life so much easier. And eventually this trans is going to come out. So, and I definitely need to work on the tail shaft. But a couple things to think about when you're working on your car and your driveway. So let me fight this and get that gear out, and I'll be right back with you. All right, it is pretty much end of the day today. That job was not fun. I ran into a couple problems. And mainly it was just with the gearbox. You have to excuse me a little bit. I got a little bit of a cold. My son was sick all last week, and I think I picked up a little bit of it. But so the power or the gearbox, I knew that was going to be a struggle. One, that thing is wicked heavy, and two, I knew with that new exhaust on there that it just wasn't going to go out the bottom, and sure enough, didn't go out the bottom. I had two options: either take the exhaust off or take the brake booster out. So as you can see what's missing, which option I chose. One, because I've already had the back portion of this or the front portion of the exhaust out from the headers all the way back to the mufflers, and it is an absolute bear on the ground, super hard to do. If I had the hoist, it would be a lot easier, but even on the hoist, I think I would have chose the brake booster and master. One, because I need to change it anyways, and two, honestly, I think it was easier. The donuts and everything else up there at the manifolds are just an absolute bear. So this is what I've got going on. Of course, we saw the pump was already in, and then I went ahead and put the pressure line in, and you'll notice that I put some heat sleeve on it. Again, that's that same heat sleeve that I used on the fuel line. It's like a fiberglass woven with a kind of, spongy exterior. It's that silicone kind of exterior. It works pretty good. I did some work for NASCAR, and we used to use that a lot. And so that, I think, should help cool it down, at least keep it cool. Another brilliant design by Ford. Let's put the power steering hose right next to the exhaust manifold. Why they did that, I have no idea. And then the other problem I ran into is right down here. Sorry, my mic is hitting the fender. Is right down here. That's the return line. And normally on the other pump, at least on the other two pumps I had, it came back this way. It pointed toward the fender. And so the little nipple would come out of the back and it would run this way. This one comes out and runs down. Which for me going forward is not too big of a problem. I would still rather have it come this way, so it would just kind of come up and then run that way. Not too big of a problem. What I did was ran it right down by the fuel pump, by the fuel filter and the oil filter, and then it kind of follows that fuel line that goes back up, and then it comes up the front here. And for now, all I did was just put this brass 90 that I had in place, because the end product is going to be a power steering filter, and then of course that cooler up here at the front. So I made this line long enough to reach the cooler, and then the power steering filter will go somewhere right here, and then it'll have another line that goes up to the cooler as well. So all that's in place. I got them attached down to the gear down there. The gear's all in place. Everything's bolted down, tight, ready to go. I still need to fill the power steering. I'm going to take the belt off and just kind of run it by hand and get some of that fluid pumped throughout the system. But that's going to do it, I think, for this episode. I need to break this up into a third part because the brakes on this are going to be interesting, because you'll notice there's only one little brake line right there, and the master cylinder that I have is 2. So because it's set up for a disc drum setup or disc setup, I could just run both of them together and run one line. I mean, it's not really going to hurt anything. But I might as well just go ahead and set it up now the way that it's supposed to be set up, which means I have to make some brake lines and change some fittings and do some work. But what I can do is I'll just turn the brake bias all the way to where it's 50-50. You know, it's split perfectly. They both have the same pressures, and then you just run drum. It's not that big a deal. It might be a little grabby, but no big deal. At least until I can get the discs ordered for this car and get them in. At least all the brakes and everything will be set up. The car will be movable. It won't be 100% perfect, but it'll be movable and it'll work. So I think that's going to do it for this episode. Thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate all of you. Today was quite rough. I had one of the collection cars showed up today. The owner's son has a I think it's an 85 AE86 Toyota. And he was having some problems with it, saying it had some lack of power and stuff. So we brought it in, did a compression, leak down, looked at the spark plugs, read all that kind of stuff, looked at the ignition. Spark plugs actually read pretty good. It actually looked a little bit lean, but really not all that bad. And so I was going to start tracking down fuel, but we ran compression on it, and number 2 had 50 pounds. So we did leak down, and it blew off into the crankcase. So either the pistons destroyed or the rings are messed up. I should have stuck a camera down the hole, but I mean, honestly, at this point, it really doesn't matter. The motor needs to come apart. So as soon as I talk to the owner and figure out when he wants to get that done, we'll probably have that car on the show, because it's going to be a whole engine rebuild. And on an AE86, it's kind of neat because Toyota actually started making parts again for those old cars because they are so popular, which was a smart move. The car's in really neat shape. If you were watching Donut Media and they were talking about cars that were sold on BAT, it's a red AE86 that we bought off of BAT, so it's that car. Really clean car. It's neat. It's never been messed with. It's just in the stock configuration, and it's kind of a real time capsule. So, but the motor's tired and needs to be done. Really, the whole car needs a restoration. But I guess we'll start with the motor. But as soon as I know more on that, we'll get that on the channel. But this is going to do it for this car today. Probably come back tomorrow and start the 3rd chapter on the brakes, because that's going to be quite interesting with all of the new brake lines and that kind of stuff. A lot of stuff for me to show you. I spend a lot of time in brake engineering, so bending brake lines and doing that kind of stuff, I can make it look really good, really cool. And it's really not all that hard. It just takes a little bit of patience. So thank you again for tuning in, and don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.